Hi, this is Annie Fox for Family Confidential, Secrets of Successful Parenting. My guest today is Marlene Mahurin, co-founder of Time for the Talk, an online sex education program for parents and preteens. Good morning, Marlene, and welcome to Family Confidential.
Thanks, Annie. I'm super excited to be here.
So you're a sex educator for parents and tweens, preteens, and I'm really curious about how you got into this business, because most parents would run faster than anything to have to talk to their kids about sex.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's kind of a fun story. I am a former sixth grade teacher, and I worked at a school where it was kindergarten through sixth grade. So I taught all the subjects to my sixth graders. And every spring, I would do a unit on family life, and we would talk about puberty and the birds and the bees and peer pressure and all of these really important topics. And it was always so fascinating to me how thirsty these kids were for the information. And yeah, they would be a little bit embarrassed at first, but once they got past that, they just couldn't get enough information from me, which I thought was really great. But I also had this sort of nagging feeling in me that it was too bad they were having these conversations with me as opposed to with their parents, because ideally, they would become comfortable talking to their parents about this stuff. And then as they, grew older, became teenagers, they would still feel comfortable talking to their parents. And so I just always had this idea in the back of my mind that someday I would have a program that included the parents and the preteens, and that I could share with them a comprehensive sex education program that helped prepare them for the teen years, and so that they would learn that no matter what they wanted to talk about, their parents were okay with it.
Okay, now I'm thinking, as you're saying, the kids got really comfortable, and we hope that they would be comfortable talking to their parents about sex. What about the parents' discomfort?
That's
Because
such a good question. Yeah, when I always do a class when I have live classes and online classes, and in my live classes, I always do a night first just for the parents, so they can come and find out, exactly what I'm going to be teaching, so there's no surprises. And I tell you, the parents oftentimes are just as nervous, if not more, than the kids,
for
because,
sure.
most of us didn't grow up in homes where sex was something that you talked about, or, the changes that you go through with puberty and that kind of thing. And so many of the parents I work with, they want to do it differently, but they don't know how. They don't have that role model or that example. And so, yeah, I've had parents who, get a complete case of the giggles, or they, hide their face. And I tell them it's totally okay. This isn't something that, we normally talk about. But they get more comfortable too, for sure.
That's great. And of course, that helps the kids, and then they open up.
Absolutely.
And that open communication is really key. I'm sure that is what you emphasize in your class. Now, I wanted to ask you the typical question, since parents are not real excited about jumping
Mhm.
into this, they probably want to
Yeah.
put it off as long as possible. What's a really good age to start talking to your kids about sex?
Right. Well, I actually encourage parents to talk to their kids from the time they're in diapers, toddlers, and obviously at an age appropriate level. So,
So what
talking,
is a typical thing that you might talk to a 3-year-old about
you
that
might
is
talk,
part of sex education?
well, first just getting comfortable with their body and the different, the accurate names of their body parts. So talk about washing their vagina in the bathtub, or washing their penis, and, talking about just the different parts that sort of become taboo as we get older. But just starting out early, making it comfortable for them to talk about, any part of their body. Sometimes parents didn't do that. They talk about the wee wee and the, that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
that's okay. There's no point where, oh, it's too late now, you've blown it. Thankfully, that's not true. But as kids get older, in some ways, it's much easier to talk to a 4-year-old than a 10-year-old if you've never started that.
Mhm.
But if that's the case, I definitely encourage parents to have talked to their kids about things like menstruation and how babies are made and that sort of thing by the time they're 9. Because at that age, kids are just beginning to be exposed to so much information via the internet, the music that we listen to, TV
Their
shows,
friends,
friends at
for
school,
sure.
magazine covers at the grocery store.
Good point.
And so it's really important for them to have an accurate explanation of how everything happens, because kids oftentimes have half the story. Um, and so it's really important for parents to start that conversation by the time they're 9.
Yeah, and even though your website and your program is called The Talk, Time for the talk.
Time
We
for
all
the
know
talk.
that it's more than one talk.
Yeah, and there's actually a bit of an irony there because our website is timeforthetalk.com. But the goal really is to have a lifelong conversation with these things. Parents love to think like, okay, I told them how babies are made. Now cross that off my list. It's done.
Right.
But no, it really needs to be an ongoing conversation because the issues change as kids get older. In fact, it's interesting. I have had parents and their, the same child go through my program more than one time because, they'll go through it once when their child is 10, and then when they're 11 and a half, they're at a real different place with things like puberty and what they're being exposed to, and they want to take the classes again at that stage. So no, it definitely is an ongoing conversation. In fact, I say, 2 years from now, when your child's say 13, they may not remember all the details of the class, the facts of what they've learned, but what they will remember is that you were sitting right next to them and the feeling they had as they learned together that this is okay to talk and learn about this stuff with my parent.
Okay, my mind is spinning in two directions here.
Yeah.
One has to do with the inevitable question when you talk to a child who is now understanding the mechanics of where babies come from. The inevitable question is, you and dad did that?
Right.
Or do that? And I think that's a parent's biggest fear, that, it's one thing to talk about it in the abstract, birds and bees. It's another thing to be saying, yeah, this is how you were made. Do you still do that?
Right.
That kind of thing. So how do you advise parents to answer that very inevitable question?
Yeah, that's another really good question. It's interesting. Most kids don't actually go there. Some do, and I can address how to handle that when
yes,
they do.
Go there.
I have found that some, a lot of us, when we think about our parents being intimate like that, it's kind of a thought. And so lots of times they won't go there. They might make that connection in their mind, but they won't ask personal questions. But there are kids who do.
Yeah.
So what we talk about is in the Time for the Talk program, we talk about the different reasons that people have sex, that it's not just to make babies, but that it's also to show love and to feel really close with somebody, and how that is a very private, intimate thing. So that, yes, of course, moms and dads have sex to make babies, but to talk about the details of that with other people is sharing something that is private and that is intimate, and that it really isn't to be discussed with other people. So that even though I so appreciate your questions and I love that you feel comfortable asking them, I don't feel comfortable sharing the personal details of my romantic relationship with your father.
Okay, so it's kind of a deflection. It's gentle and it's respectful. I
Setting
get that.
boundaries.
But then what happens? Because just in case you don't know, I've been on the receiving end of email from tweens and teens for the past 16 years.
Right.
Sex comes up a lot, and a lot of the kind of situations they get themselves into, which motivate them to write for help.
Right.
And is their lack of information to make good decisions about their sexual activity as 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. Now, if the message here is that this is private, then why should I be telling mom and dad about what I'm doing?
Right. Yeah, it's a really good question. There is a fine line there. One thing that I really stress in the program is just the difference between kind of private and public information, and how, talking about the details of something that is sacred and special makes it a little less so. Now, what we focus on with our Time for the Talk program for the preteen is how different decisions can impact their future.
Good.
So, it's a 5-week program that we offer. And the first part is very, based on the facts of, what to expect with puberty and, how babies are made and that kind of thing. But then we shift the program and it goes into teen pregnancy and what the challenges for that would be. How would your life change if all of a sudden 2 years from now you had an infant to care for? And one of the ways we go about that is we have some activities where kids get to focus on their values and their goals. And then we give them different role plays and situations and talk about okay, well, if your values are to get a good education and to be close with your parents, and one of your goals 5 years from now is to be applying to certain colleges, how would having sex, getting pregnant, and having a baby impact those goals.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're smart. They start making these connections that, wow, I couldn't do that
Mm-hmm.
if I had a child to care for.
And that's, of course, that's rational thinking.
Yeah.
And I'll play devil's
Yeah.
advocate for the moment here, because most of the tweens and teens who write to me have gotten themselves in a situation where the rational mind went AWOL,
Right.
missing in action because they were in the heat of the moment.
Right.
And it's either the intensity of wanting to be so close. This person likes me. It feels really natural. It feels good. And
Right.
all those ideas I had about my future and really thinking before I made a potentially life-altering decision are out the window. How do you help them prepare for heat in the moments?
Yeah. We talk about that too. I have a great story that I share with them that has to do with chocolate chip cookies. And, I had imagine them picturing this big platter of fresh baked
Oh, I love
chocolate
them.
chip cookies. You can smell them, you can pull them apart, the chocolate goos, and they are your favorite. And then I say, okay, I'm going to put this plate of cookies right in front of you, but I'm going to tell you, you can't eat them. You're starving. You haven't had them in months, but you cannot eat them.
Ooh.
They're risky. You can't eat them. What are you going to do? And so they talk about, wow, that would be really difficult. And because a lot of the kids I work with between 10 and 12 are still a little bit grossed out about the idea of sex. It's one of the reasons that I try to catch them at this age before the hormones really kick in full force. And when I say that, right now you may think this is a really gross, disgusting concept, but a few years from now, you're probably going to feel pretty differently about it. So that's why thinking through some of these situations ahead of time can help prepare you for when you're in them. So, you've got these cookies there, you want to eat them, but you can think through, well, if I start eating these cookies, how might that affect future things that happen to me? And they can get the idea of wanting to eat cookies sometimes more than they can understand the idea of having strong sexual urges when you're 10.
It's a great metaphor. I love what you're saying here. Now, often the onus for saying no comes from girls.
Right.
And I want to know, in your experience of working with 10 to 12-year-olds, do you have boys in the program?
Oh, that's a great question.
And is the approach for boys different than the approach that you take educationally with girls?
Yeah, that's a really great question. My classes have been, on the internet, anybody can take it, boy or girl. And part of it is that I think it's really important for both boys and girls to understand the other's situation, whether it's having to do with puberty, what are the changes girls go through? What are the changes boys go through? What are the changes both of them go through, which really are the most of the changes they both go through. So just kind of understanding that, how it all works, but also for hearing how they think so differently about stuff, I think is very, very important. And I have had all girl classes. I have had co-ed classes, but I actually just finished my first all boy class. And it was very interesting to see the difference in their thought process. And I would say my approach was a little bit different because, they can't become teen moms since they're boys. But we definitely talked a lot about how it would also still affect them if their girlfriend someday had a baby young, how, legally they would still be responsible for helping to take care of and support that child. And what it would be like for the girlfriend. And I actually found it very inspiring how seriously and thoughtful they took those conversations and realizing just the impact that could have on their life.
Well, I love this approach. And of course, it's not all in the lap, so to speak, of the girl.
Yeah.
Where she just say no thing. We need to understand where the other side is coming from and what drives and motivates them.
Yes.
And that we need to be mutually respectful in any relationship that we're in.
Absolutely.
We're just about running out of time, Marlene, and I want to make sure that we just hit on 3 tips for parents who obviously they should check out timeforthetalk.com. But if they're not ready to do that, to be aware of 3 things that they can be doing to make a positive impact on their children in the realm of sex education for them.
Absolutely. Well, I think the very first thing parents need to realize is that it's different today because of how easily kids can access information. So, when we were growing up, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have Google, we didn't have YouTube. And today it's the reality. There's good things about it, but then there are also some risky things about it. So I would definitely say one of the first things is to talk to your kids about how easily you can look up information and how difficult it is to erase things from your mind
Ooh,
that
good
you have
point.
stumbled upon. I know just myself in creating these classes with my partner, Tori, that there were times where we both discovered things where we were just like, I didn't need to see that. And so just to supervise their kids on the internet, it's hard to be there every minute. They have access with iPods and all that kind of stuff, but to really have them understand that you can find information really quickly that you might not be trying to find, and it can be damaging. And also to really talk about their instincts and giving them the vocabulary words appropriate and inappropriate information, so that, if they're searching something and something comes up and it just doesn't feel right to them, to say, that's your instincts. That's great. Trust that. That's your body's way of telling you, I shouldn't be looking at this.
I love that. Trust your instincts. And you can
Yeah.
use that during a Google search when something
Mhm.
unwanted comes, or when someone is approaching you, a peer, anyone with
In
a
any
suggestion,
situation.
pushing you in a
Mhm.
direction that just doesn't feel right.
doesn't
Trust your
feel
gut,
right.
trust your instincts. I
Yeah.
love that. Was that
Yeah.
two of them? Supervise your kids,
Yeah,
trust your
your
instinct, and the
instincts.
third
And
one?
then third one, I would say look for teachable moments. They're everywhere. If you're in the car driving your kids and, Katy Perry comes on and she's singing about, let's go all the way and, have no worries for the future, talk about, hey, is that true? Can you go all the way and have no worries, or are there things that you might worry about? Or when you're watching shows together, talk about, Miley Cyrus on the VMAs. Why do you think, what's going on here? And, what messages are being sent, and just look for ways to talk about these topics that come up naturally, where it's not so focused on the kid. Let's sit down and talk about this, because some kids have tons of questions and they'll ask them, and some kids won't bring it up ever. So just look for ways.
I love the way you phrase some of those questions too. What do you think is going on here? Rather
Yes.
than, this isn't right, is it? Yes or no
Definitely
answers.
not from a judgment place, but just from a place of opening up the dialogue. Because again, that's always our goal with these classes, is to just get your kids comfortable talking to you about the information.
Exactly. And I would just add one more thing to that. When parents are feeling like they need to say something, but they're just like, "Argh," I say, take a slow, deep breath before you think about the kind of question you're asking, because really you're trying to make a safe place for your child to talk about these things with you, so that you can understand each other and really transmit the values you want to transmit.
Right. And sometimes I think kids think that, or parents think their kids aren't getting a sex education if they haven't talked to them yet. But the reality is they're getting a sex education every day from the stuff they're exposed to, which is probably not the education the parent would pick for them, which is why, it's so important for parents to take an active role in talking to their kids about this stuff.
I love it. That's a great reminder. They are getting a sex education, whether it's coming from you or not, and it might as well be coming from you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it can be done in a fun way, a fun, close, bonding way, which is the way, our classes are created.
Terrific. So before we sign off here, Marlene, could you tell us where parents can find out more about your online sex education program?
Absolutely. The web address is timeforthetalk.com. And we have a lot of great free resources on there. In fact, parents can go, and if they put in their name and email, they'll get a free copy of a call that my co-founder and I, Tori Henderson, did on why don't let YouTube be your child's sex educator. Comes free, no obligation for anything. Okay. And then it also gets parents signed up to get our twice monthly blog, where we just answer different questions we've gotten about all of these different topics. There's also information on there about our online program, which is super easy to do. I went through it with my own daughter. It was really special, close bonding time, and also very educational and comprehensive.
This is great. Thank you so much for the work you do. It's really needed. And
Thanks,
I'm happy
Annie.
that you're out there doing it.
Yeah, it's a passion. We absolutely love it.
Thanks. This is Annie Fox with Family Confidential. To learn more about my work with parents, tweens, and teens, visit anniefox.com. And please tune in next week for a new podcast. Till then, happy parenting.